doing this speech in my room in the basement with all my Star Wars stuff behind me, so any noises that you might hear from upstairs, I apologize for. So my speech is about the gender wage gap, and it's about that it's been a little bit exaggerated. So I have here a quote. It says, women are paid 84 cents compared to every dollar a man earns. This, along with several other hyperbolized and out-of-context statements, is a commonly heard phrase when discussing the gender wage gap. For many years, people have complained that women are not paid equally to men. While this may be partially true, it is nowhere near the extent where people claim. There are several factors that work together to portray the gap as being much larger than it is in reality. With the help of flawed studies, differing interests, extreme bias, and work habits, the gender wage gap has been very exaggerated. Possibly the biggest cause of this exaggeration is flawed studies. The biggest way that statistics can be misleading is by giving them out of context and without explanation of how they were found. Pew Research Center gives statistics about the gender wage gap that were found in 2018, so they're pretty recent. The overall point they make with the data is that the wage gap has narrowed slightly since the year 1980, but really hasn't made much progress. Thankfully, Pew Research Center also provides how they went about getting their data. They describe how their data was measured based off of hourly earning instead of weekly salary, and how that results in more accurate data. What they did not take into account, however, was that this data was not taken from the same job. Instead, it was the result of several different careers, from surveying several different careers. The unfairness of this type of data gathering is it can be shown just within like the medical field, for example. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, 64% of doctors are males and the majority of nurses are females at 91%. Doctors make an average salary of $294,000 per year compared to nurses who make an average of $73,000 per year. When taking data from differing jobs, such as nurses and doctors, it can be clear that it will show that men make more money yearly because they're comparing a job dominated by men that earns a lot to a job dominated by women that does not earn as much. This does not show unfairness in earnings between men and women, but instead it's just because of the career choices of the genders. So it doesn't really show unfairness, just a differing of how they choose careers. When data is not taken from men and women working the same job, it cannot be used to give an overall statement about earning differences between the genders because it does not take into account that different careers paid more than others. Males and females have different interests, which cause them to tend to pick different careers, which kind of like feeds into what I was saying earlier. There are predominantly male and female careers. Men tend to lean towards STEM, science, technology, and engineering and math fields, whereas women tend to pursue careers related to nurturing and helping others, according to a study done by Business Insider in 2015. Some people view this as bad and unfair, but it's quite the opposite actually. Different people have different interests, which make them want different aspects included in their job. Some people argue with this and say that women and men choose different careers because they think they're pushed into these jobs, or they'd be discriminated against if they chose a job not dominated by their career. This can be disproven by a study done about the Scandinavian effort to achieve an egalitarian society. In the Scandinavian region, the countries in that area made significant changes so there would be equality and no discrimination of jobs regardless of gender. The Scandinavian countries, specifically Norway, are ranked as the most equal in terms of pay and lack of discrimination. As far as gender is concerned, scientists hypothesized that this job equality for genders would make men and women more likely to pursue careers that had previously been dominated by the other gender. However, the opposite happened. The more equal that society became, the more separated the genders became. An example of this was fewer women entered STEM careers than before. So with the reasons that people claim to cause the career separation totally gone, the separation still existed. So even without there being any discrimination, because that is the most highly ranked country as far as lack of discrimination goes, even without any discrimination, they still chose those jobs. So with that, you can show that separation among careers within genders is not a bad thing, but it's actually what genders desire. Another cause of the exaggeration of the gender wage gap, and possibly the most surprising one, is the biased belief that it exists. Pew Research Center did a study in which they found that 62% of women believe that women generally get paid less than men for doing the same work. This is not a surprising statistic because several people, 54% of men and 70% of women, as quoted by CNBC, believe heavily in the gender wage gap. The unexpected part of the Pew Research Center is that only 14% of women believe that women in their place of work at their jobs were paid unequally. This data shows that people have been convinced of the existence of the gender wage gap around without them even believing that it exists within their own careers. How could the gender wage gap be as extreme as it's said to be without people even seeing the evidence of the gap around them? Like only 14% of people. Work habits are another overlooked contributor to the gender wage gap, beginning with the hours worked by men versus women. Several studies, including one done by Cato Institute in 2017 and Pew Research Center in 2018, have shown that on average men work longer hours than women. This is due to a variety of reasons, which include priorities that women and men have. Women tend to spend more time taking care of their families, and men tend to spend more time working. Neither one of those is a bad thing or anything. It's just how different genders tend to spend their time. With these longer hours worked, men tend to earn larger wages because of the extra time working. The opposing side makes an argument that is stated by Harvard economist Claudia Golden. She writes in one of her articles, the gender gap in pay would be considerably reduced and might even vanish if firms did not incentivize or give. Let me start again. My bad. The gender gap in pay would be considerably reduced and might even vanish if firms did not have an incentive to disproportionately reward individuals who worked long hours and who worked particular hours. An interesting part of the statement, she said individuals, which shows that highly paid long and particular hours are available to both genders, and employers pay workers extra to work these undesirable hours because it's hard to find workers for these hours. So it's understandable that less desirable hours would get paid more to incentivize people to work them. And the opposing argument for the longer, less desirable hours should not be looked at as rational and is not a relevant argument for the gender wage gap. In conclusion, the gender wage gap is extremely exaggerated, and there are several causes of this misperception that people believe in and attempt to fix it. People have been influenced into believing the existence of the wage gap when in reality it can be explained by a few simple arguments, which are flawed studies, differing interests, and extreme bias, and differing work habits.